2 weeks ago, my husband found out that he was being laid off. And to be honest with you, I really thought that I would freak out in that moment and that I would be filled with an air of desperation. After I left my corporate job, I would think, okay, what would happen if my husband lost his job too? And every time I would have that sort of daydream or fantasy or imagine what that would look like, I would be filled with anxiety and fear. And now that the day has come, I'm surprisingly calm about it. And I will say that I think the credit goes to God for that. And so if you stick around to the end, I will give you a praise report on exactly why I think God gets the credit for my mental fortitude right now. But I also recognize that a lot of that has to do with the way that my husband and I organized our finances. In today's video, I'm going to break down exactly why I believe we are in a position to see this displacement as an opportunity, even though it is with mixed emotions. And there's really 5 things that we did, and they're kind of big ticket items. So I will be candid that I don't think you can do them all at once, but I do think if you set your goals and you have a plan in place, they can be your reality as well. Item number 1 is an emergency savings account. Listen, this is personal finance 101 type stuff, right? This is the idea that you should have some degree of personal savings so that if an emergency comes up, and right, this emergency could be a whole slew of different things. It could be, your car breaking down. It could be a problem with your house. It could be a job loss. In this situation, we particularly had 6 months worth of emergency savings. Depending on your personal situation, you might decide 6 months is more than you need, and you might decide that 6 months is not enough. It really depends on what your individual situation is. I do have a freebie that I offer to people. It's called the Big Picture Workbook, and it is something that will list out a series of questions for you to answer to help you decide what is the right amount of emergency savings that is best for you. For us, after we went through a similar set of questions, we decided 6 months was more than enough. So that's what we have. We have 6 months of emergency savings, and that's nice. We have that in a high yield savings over at Vanguard, and it's a comfort to us. Item number 2 to go with the emergency savings is something I call an emergency budget. And I do have a separate video on this that I will link for you guys above. The concept of the emergency budget is when you are put in a high stress situation that you've already decided what are the things you're going to cut out of your budget before you entered that high stress situation. So it's kind of like they always say, like when you're in emotional distress, you never want to make any big decisions. I totally agree with that because you're not thinking clearly. And a job loss, that's a pretty significant change in your life. So it is better if you've made some decisions over how you're going to change your budget prior to any of those changes going into effect. So what does that look like for us? Okay, well, what that ultimately is going to look like for right now is we are going to cut out extra streaming apps. Like every household in America, you slowly accumulate extra streaming apps and just apps on your phone. Those are all going bye-bye except for Netflix and Prime. The second item is, I've mentioned this in a lot of videos before, our house really tremendously values physical fitness, and that includes travel sports. So unfortunately for my kids right now, we're pausing travel sports. So anything that we're currently committed to, we're going to see that through to the end. We're very forthright with both of our kids about our financial situation. We let them know, like, we've made a lot of good decisions and we want you to learn from our decisions, right? Because it's positioning us well to handle when crazy things happen. But also we need to be conservative until we know what my husband's income streams are going to look like in the future. And therefore we're taking these things away, but we're not doing it as a punishment and we're not doing it out of fear. We're doing it out of financial responsibility. Item number 3 is that we have Roth retirement accounts. So this is not something that I recommend people immediately lean into, and it's not something we're going to lean into right away. But the power of a Roth account versus a traditional account is that unless you've got some stipulations with your employer, which again, in this situation, my husband is losing his employment, so it's not really going to apply. But when you track the contributions you make to a Roth account, that's after-tax dollars. You can actually take that back out again without having penalties. So we've got probably, I would say maybe another 6 months at least of living expenses as Roth contributions that we've made that we would be able to access without any penalty. Now, I wish we had more than that we could access if we wanted to, because we've even contemplated pulling some of our Roth money out for other investment properties in the future. But we started our Roths late, so we didn't really learn very much about Roths until we had already invested heavily into the traditional. So that money is there. And I mean, frankly, if things really went sideways for us, we could access that too and then just pay the taxes and the penalties on it. But that to me would be like an utterly last resort, and I find it extremely unlikely we would ever do that. Item number 4 is that we have other passive income streams. We do have investment accounts that pay us dividends. It's not very much. I have a book on Amazon. It's not paying me very much. But we recognize that there are other ways for us to make money, right? So we have the rental property. I mean, that's a big ticket item for us, but that cash flow positive, a couple $1,000s a month. So all of that money historically, we've just left in the business to build up the pot so that we could acquire more rental properties. But if we had to pause that and just say, okay, like pay the minimum that we need to pay to the business in order to keep it operating and be a legitimate good landlord, do that and pull the rest of it and pay for our groceries. So we have other sources of income that we can rely on. And I am a huge advocate for passive income sources. And I'm always challenging my clients to think of ways that they can do that. And then the last item, which is, I think, really important, is being debt-free. I mean, we don't have payments. Our cars are paid off. Our home is paid off. So frequently people will say to me, oh, you shouldn't have paid off your house. You only had a 3.25% interest rate on it. Yeah, well, now my husband doesn't have a job and I'm only bringing in $50K a year. So it's kind of nice not having that mortgage payment. Again, that big picture workbook, if you're interested, it does kind of spell out different ways to pay off debt. It spells out how much emergency savings you have. It gives you an idea of other saving strategies. And it gives you an idea of what you want your future to be like so that even if you're not dealing with a crisis, you can be working monetarily toward goals that are meaningful to you. Okay, and then for those of you who are willing to stick around and listen to my praise report, I do want to take a moment just to give some glory to God, because you guys know that I'm a believer. And honestly, sometimes I'm so wowed by divine timing. My husband and I have been actively looking for a new home, right? And here's the funny thing about it is I'm telling you right now how wonderful it is to not have a mortgage payment and how wonderful it is to be debt-free. We had been actively considering taking out a mortgage. We've been wanting to get a house with some land, and we knew that the cost of the houses here are about $150,000 more than what our house is worth. So we really contemplated taking out a $150,000 mortgage, and we had been looking. We had been actively looking at different properties. Part of the reason we were doing this is because my husband has it in his heart to start a business, and it's a beautiful business. Like, it's this idea of a place for men to collaborate, essentially grow their discipline through physical fitness. So joining 5Ks together, running half marathons together, practicing jujitsu together, doing cold plunges together, entering saunas, like all of this stuff, the contrast therapy and the degree of physical fitness. This is all very helpful to do it for your mental health anyway and for your physical health, but to do it as a group, to let men come together so they don't all feel like they're lone wolves and mavericks out there. Anyway, I say all of that to tell you that part of the plan for buying a new house was we were specifically looking for a house that had a large outbuilding, because with him working full time, we needed something that he could easily access to kind of like create a place for the sauna and the cold plunge and the jujitsu mats. And we thought the most reasonable way to pursue this would be to buy a house with a large outbuilding that he could essentially say his business is run out of this building. We took that to the Lord in prayer, and we really felt like, hey, we're in agreement on this. This is definitely the right course of action. And so we were moving steadily toward that, because the business idea that he has, we've just gotten so many confirmations along the way that this is a business that is going to be helpful to the community. And so we really want to pursue it. We want to be obedient to the Lord and deliver on this sort of promise in his heart. God is so good, because Justin got this notice. My husband got this notice right before we were about to start going down that path. And he paused us and he stopped us. And it's like, I just think I'm so grateful that this happened right now, because if it had happened any later, we would have that mortgage, and maybe that feeling of calm I have wouldn't come so naturally. Maybe I really would be more freaked out. And I don't know about you guys, but I just don't believe in coincidence, and I haven't for a very long time. But I really genuinely look at them like it's divine providence. And so I just am so grateful to God that he has been with us, that he has not forsaken us, and that he has put us in this weird spot we are going to have to navigate. But I have total confidence that he'll provide for us and give us guidance along the way, because he's done it so far. Why wouldn't he keep doing it? Anyway, that's the story. That's what's going on with us right now. That's my praise report. But more importantly, this is why I care so much about personal finance. I want people to be able to make sound decisions in confidence when things go sideways in their life. And then in addition to that, I want them to pursue the things they care the most about, the purpose and the callings on their lives. And I think sometimes bad money decisions keep us from being able to do that. And that's just a shame. So I hope this video is helpful to you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.